Hey everyone, welcome back to Crypto Cash. Thank you so much again for joining me here. Hoping a phenomenal day. Thank you again so much for being an amazing part of my life. Just want to share this with you. We got 49 subscribers yesterday. That's actually quite awesome on one video. Probably one of the most amount of views we've gotten in a while. So thank you again for doing your part, commenting below, liking, subscribing, and following. Appreciate that very much. Don't forget to enable notifications. Congrats to our community members here as well. We got, 57% in 7 hours from a Bitcoin short at 91.5 to 86.7. We probably could have left that open a little bit longer, but the price is running. It was important to secure profits. We also took some nice profits on our AVAX trade from a couple of days ago, 56% there. So awesome stuff. We're doing this all on the best exchange. Make sure you use the link down below for Bitunix. We actually have a new promotion coming up this month. It's going to be freaking really awesome. Pardon my French or whatever you want to call that. Furthermore, too, in our Discord, I'm going to provide a new update here, but I'm going to be running back the Dumptober sale in December, basically 25 days of Christmas. There's going to only be 25 slots available instead of 50, but generally speaking, that's going to be available here soon. I'll provide that in the description below. So let's jump on into kind of what's going on with the back end here, kind of give you some highlights on what we're going to cover today. First of all, we're changing the dynamic a little bit because a lot of people voted yesterday that we want to kind of change things a little bit. In other words, the thumbnails worked out pretty well. In other words, we kind of jump in here what I asked for a poll, and people kind of voted that they like the current format, right? So we're going to stick with that. But there was more votes here letting us know that they like the current format as well, but most people commented that they only really watched these videos for Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Solana, and then XRP and SUI, they pretty much only watched that just to kind of help grow the channel, which is appreciated. So what I'll do is I'm going to start separating those, okay? So we're just going to go ahead and try that out. We'll do 3 and 3 moving forward. Anyways, at this point here, we want to talk about the fact that everything is in the red. Of course, we know this, but how much lower is it going to go, right? Is this dump over? Well, some of the top movers right now to the downside are Zcash. Sorry if you are invested there. SPX, Aster, IP, Pump, and Penguin, as well as SUI. That's why we have the FSUI in our neighborhood here, or our community, right? It's kind of a running theme here because that coin has a tendency of just doing quite poorly when the market moves to the downside. Speaking of downside, let's look at the crypto market dominance. Just to clarify, we can see stablecoin is absorbing tons of market cap. It's standard when altcoins dump, money flows into stablecoin. It's actually funny because a lot of people, unlike you and I, more so the whales, they're the ones putting money into stablecoin because they're waiting. They already know what's happening, right? They know this is going to happen, so they just stay on the sidelines, wait for the bottom. You should be doing that too. That's kind of the concept there. So until these things start to bottom out, there's no real reason to consider taking a long just yet. Now, do you short what feels like the bottom or could be the bottom? Probably not. We want to do our due diligence and just double check to make sure we're not just jumping on in. But that's kind of the summary there. So that's what we're going to cover here today. Buckle up. Let's take a look. All right, folks, so going to start off with the backend data here with liquidation and open interest, specifically starting here with their order blocks. If you look on the right-hand side, you can see some pretty big chunks of positions trying to be bought here, 84.5, 83.5, and roughly 83,000. Those are kind of the outliers there. There's a significant amount of sell pressure, 85,000, of course, but generally speaking, we're going to discuss here today what levels are super important based on previous lows, not just, whimsical Fibonacci retracement levels. Not to say there's anything wrong with that, but there's not a lot of confluence in those levels. We'll talk about that and the reason why it's more important to recognize previous structures and how that works in consistency or congruency rather with that of liquidation. Okay, those are all things that we kind of look at. That's why I was pretty weak-handed on Bitcoin yesterday, thinking that it's not a good idea to try to take a long on a Sunday afternoon, and we were right. The price went down and we took some profits. So either way, let's take a look here at we already looked at that. Let's look at liquidation, 24-hour liquidation here. We got more, basically late longs here between 82,000 and 84,000. So that could be the next potential target. As longs continue to pile up, people are, they're going to continue to get swept. That's just kind of the natural way of things. That's how market makers make their money, right? They drive the price down until everyone's scared to death, and then once nobody wants to buy anymore, they're the ones to buy. Okay. At this point, though, the 7-day liquidation looks pretty sparse. There's not a lot kind of telling us that we're going to go in either direction based on this metric here. Just based on the simple fact that most 7-day liquidation has been hit, right? Over the weekend it went up. Just late last night, early today, went down. And at this point, the 30-day liquidation kind of lets us know that 85,000 and 83.5 are the two outliers there. Okay, so those are kind of the areas we want to maybe consider taking some trades. Let's go ahead and get some refreshed here. double check the back end data. And just to clarify, fear and greed index is back on its way down, right? So we can kind of see, of course, pretty obvious the fear is increasing, or obviously the greed index is decreasing, essentially the same thing. But all that said, though, once we hit that $80,000 mark, if we were to hit that, just say, there's a decent chance we either bounce from there as a double bottom, or that becomes a new resistance. I don't think that's a possibility, or a probability rather. It is still a possibility, but generally speaking, the upper 70K range is probably the worst case scenario. And I can explain what I mean by that here shortly. There's a lot of macro support in that range. That was a previous high range for us before we took off towards that 112,000 range. Anyways, take a look at our open interest. Once again, 91.5, 91.7. That's that exact level we'd identified yesterday. Exactly why we took that short, right? Price would not or could not surpass that level. Future reference too, if you're in our Discord or even Telegram, this is an available option for you. I always send out a trade alert, kind of letting you know why I'm planning to take the trades we're taking, right? So there's a lot of liquidation at 90,000. The price action was more likely to pull back. Open interest resistance at 92,000, which we just identified. There's a lot of reasons why that the price is continuing to run, and why it's not a surprise that the price is pulling back here. All that being said, take a look at short liquidation delta. The whole point of me trying to look at this is it's important to recognize that the momentum has shifted, right? We're starting to plateau over the weekend too. If you saw my liquidation delta from yesterday, it was pretty much at break even. I think it was roughly at about 10 billion at the time, just going sideways for the whole time. Usually when you see that and the price goes up, it's a dead cat, right? It's generally what it is. Furthermore, too, we look on the left-hand side. We want to look at lower time frames. So we've already identified the, let's go ahead and go with the 3-day because this is like the weekend liquidation. We can just kind of see here where we're at. We can see a majority of those late longs here at between 87 and 90 got hit, and there's more late longs now between 82 and 83. So there's more liquidation on the downside, probably more incentive for the price to go lower, right? And once more, it's just because of people like you and I, not myself exactly, but I'm sure there's a handful of viewers right now who are just blindly taking longs right now because they feel like it's a good value. Maybe I'll get lucky with a bounce. It's just not how you're supposed to trade. And it's not how we trade in our community, of course, but once more, degens are degens, and that's okay. You do you, just make sure you use better risk tolerance. It's all right to take a high leverage trade at a bottom that feels like it's overextended, but you kind of want to make sure you're not risking your entire portfolio on it, right? Anyways, easier said than done. So take a look at the macro structure here. Let's go ahead and start with a 3-day for Bitcoin here and just kind of clarify some key levels. First of all, these numbers are just kind of outlined from previous 3-day candlestick closures. Once more, 78,000, 71.5, and what is it? I think there was a third one. No, actually, I might have got rid of that. Probably a little easier to see without those there. But the key takeaway here is that there's a lot of confluence at the 79K range with fib levels at golden pocket and a previous low. So I would say the local bottom should be 78K plus or minus 1,000 or two. If we continue to precipitate lower. I think 71.5 is a lot less of a probability, but once more, that is that upper range of before we had this nice megaphone breakout, right? Price action just continued to progress higher there as it worked its way down. So anyways, that whole previous structure leads me to believe that we're going to see that as the worst case scenario on this potential pullback here, all right? That's kind of what we're looking there at the 3-day time frame. We are also kind of hanging out at this 88K range still. Technically, the 3-day candlestick hasn't closed yet. We got about a day left here. So if we can reclaim 88K, we'll be right there above that 200-day SMA and potentially back in good shape. Between now and then, it's best to expect range-bound activity between 84,000 and roughly 91,000, mainly because we still have yet to close below 84,800, which we're doing that right now. Actually, as a matter of fact, we're right there at that level. So our current support range is roughly 84.6. Okay, so we can just round down, say 84.5 is an easy round number. That's essentially where we need to make sure to close above today to have any legs to stand on to see this potential recovery. All right, this could be the beginning of a double bottom, but I'm not going to try to sugarcoat it. This doesn't look good. Okay, 4-hour time frame, we can see we lost our current supports, our previous range support of 86 to 88.5. So these are null and void. These are hypothetical areas of potential bounce. But when the price runs so fast, the likelihood of it bouncing is quite low. As you can kind of see here too, if you zoom in, price action held here pretty well, but once more, 8 hours later, it just continued to dump. So that's when you cut your losses if you see that level become lost. Taking a look here, let's quickly note that we did identify this. I sent this out in my trade alert, but generally speaking, there was a head and shoulders pattern confirming confluence with that resistance at 92,000 based on open interest. So those are all things that kind of led us to take that trade, and the reason why that was kind of a relevant factor there, plus low volume. There's just a lot of reasons not to take a long on a Sunday afternoon. But all that being said, hindsight's totally 2020, right? It's just kind of the way that works. But moving forward, what do we do here, right? The best thing to do is to kind of wait on the sidelines and not try to buy the just buy the dip because it's a dip. Generally speaking, we haven't seen a daily closure below 84.5. We can hold that level for the next 24 hours. That may give me some confidence to want to take a long. Between now and then, we want to see how this lower liquidation level holds. If there is just continues to pile up, then there's more likelihood of further downside. I'm willing to speculate we're going to work ourselves into a bearish rectangle and pull back. Those are my thoughts though. What are yours? Why don't you comment below? Let's take a look at the next one. Quick heads up to our traders. We got a 15% discount on trading fees if you use my link to register through Bitunix. Links down below in the description. All right, folks, take a quick look here at Ethereum and double check some important stuff. We'll do a side-by-side comparison first, just to kind of see where it's at, because it's always important to recognize, trend lines and effectively just some different, divergences between two different coins. And at this point, it's pretty obvious to me that even though the, market capitalization for Bitcoin dominance is going up, that's kind of default when everything else goes down, minus that little outlier there, we're seeing a pretty similar synonymous behavior. There's fair value gaps above the price. Price moved way too fast, so we're more likely to fill those gaps at some point. But between now and then, I wouldn't expect that to happen right away. And we can see that kind of a 1-to-1 ratio between these two coins. Okay, so generally speaking, when you see that, it's not necessarily something that gives you you shouldn't be like, oh gosh, I'm going to take a long on Ethereum because it looks way better than Bitcoin. That's not the case. It just means that it's moving consistent with Bitcoin. And honestly, if if Bitcoin's looking like it wants to go down, you probably shouldn't take a long on Ethereum because it's probably going to go down too. Right, that's the concept. Anyways, open interest here locally. This last 7 days of open interest, we can see 28.83. That was at previous area of potential support. So that could be our next high. But generally speaking, 28.60 to 28.80 would be the better case scenario for us here if we were to recover here soon. In other words, those are local resistances or just areas of open interest. They typically work like a magnet. The price does tend to pull back towards those levels. All that being said, we can see short liquidation deltas way higher than Bitcoin at this point at 10 billion. That is not good. There's too many late longs here. Look at this, 2750 to 2700. They're probably going to be on the chopping block here soon. So if Bitcoin pulls back to 82,000, sweeps that lower area of liquidation, you bet your butt 2,700 to 2,750 is the next target for Ethereum. So I would be very cautious and careful in taking a trade or try to take it a long right now because it's a very weak compared to Bitcoin. You can see that Bitcoin's got a slightly green candle here, and we got a slightly red candle on Ethereum. So basically, most altcoins are just flopping; they're belly flopping right now. So not good, not really worth considering the trade. So all that being said, is there anything that's kind of showing us that we have any key level divergences? No, definitely not. There's nothing hidden here. Some people say there's going to be a hidden indicator. There's not. It's just plain crap. It's a simple way to understand it. But the best way to understand how to trade these environments is to not trade. I try to promote that to my community. Generally speaking, when the things are running, you either don't trade or you go with the direction of the trend. The trend is down right now. You're probably better off shorting than you're going to try to magically take a long. I do prefer to take longs in most cases, but I like to wait for those liquidation levels to be hit and for trends to be established. There's no trend just yet. As far as the range, rather, more so looking for ranges to be established. All that said, 2650 to 2750 is that local support range based on previous highs. So I do think we're entering our local bottom here based on a previous macro support level or previous macro high that should be working as a new low. That is consistent with volume over the larger time frames. Okay, so we look back for the last calendar year. This is roughly the full 12 months. We can see that 2,500 was the heaviest amount of volume overall. So 25 to 2,600 is kind of that support range based on volume. And we got some fib levels here too. So those are positive in a sense because we're entering that range, but it's not great because we don't truly know how much lower we're going to go. 4-hour time frame does reflect that 2680 is that local bottom here potential for us. We have yet to close below that level in the last few months, right? So that could be the local bottom, just like 84.5 is for Bitcoin. But at this point, there's nothing really here that's promoting me to want to say, hey, you should take a long, you should take a short. What you should do is be adding to your spot bags, just setting limit orders every $100 increments on Ethereum, for example, and just continue to buy in as the price pulls back. While we don't truly know where the bottom is, if you're adding to your spot bag in the overall scenario and it's a good coin, which me personally, I still think even though ETH is constantly it's constantly hammered and so social media of how terrible it is for like it always returns to its average price. I still think in the long run this coin could be a good investment. So average in if you're considering a long position or more so adding to your spot bag. But I would recommend waiting on a leverage position at least just yet. Let's see if these liquidation levels here get hit first. So 2,700, 2,650. Those are the targets I'm looking for here. I'll go ahead and send out that new update here for our new price targets for our community shortly. Friendly reminder to our traders, we got a 15% trading discount using my link below to register for Bitunix. You'll also automatically be eligible for future trading competitions through this exchange. It's an excellent exchange. There's no KYC required. Be sure to use my link down below to register. All right, folks, take a quick look here at Solana and double check some important stuff here. Now, I want to kind of reiterate this. I left this up here specifically on purpose to drive home the fact that you don't trade based on patterns alone. Okay. Now, while we had confluence on our Bitcoin short, that essentially gave us confirmation that taking the trade was helpful, right? It was confluence in the sense that the price action was rejecting out at key level resistances and not moving any further. What I mean by that is, I mentioned this here yesterday. If you saw my video, watched it all the way through, you'll know that you never want to trade patterns alone. And just because this has a bullish pattern, it doesn't mean it's going to break out if everything else is bearish, which we identified yesterday as Solana was not a good buy, right? So all that being said, not like I'm happy the price pulled back. I mean, in a small way I am because I want to get in at this range and I think still a good value. But I just like to kind of make sure that you understand that it's a bad idea to trade patterns alone or to trade up based on fib levels. Look at how great these fib levels held up. Nothing at all. It's like they weren't even there. Okay. So once more, magical Elliott waves or different things of that sort can be quite foolhardy to try to trade solely on them, based on themselves. All that being said, if we look at Bitcoin on the left, Solana on the right, we can see we are entering our local bottom here. So there's potential that 124, 125 could be the bottom for Solana. It is holding together fairly well. If you kind of look at extremely lower time frames, we can kind of see that it is trying to ramp up here with Bitcoin. Now, that's just kind of, it's reaching, of course. I don't see any significant benefit here. It just looks like it's one-to-one with Bitcoin. So if Bitcoin bottoms out at 84.5 or 85,000, then I think Solana will too. All right. So it's kind of the concept. 125 should be the bottom based on the local low. Right? We got to give that a chance to hold. All that being said, though, open interest doesn't really tell us too much. It's all well above the price. So once more, that's why we shorted at Bitcoin at 92,000, for example, or 91.5, because there was a significant amount of open interest at 91.8 specifically, and it kind of held the price action in place, specifically with low volume on a weekend. So the same thing happened here as well, 139 to 140. It's exactly why I recommended waiting for that 130 to 135. We're at now at 125. So, right, even though my anticipation of potentially buying 130 to 135 was sound at the time, you never truly know. So that's why you don't blindly jump into a trade when Bitcoin's running. Anyways, I'm trying to educate because most people get absolutely destroyed and hammered, they eventually find my channel and they stop doing that, mainly because I'm not an emotional trader and you shouldn't be either, and just blindly taking trades isn't a good strategy. You look at Bitcoin first. That's why we always look at our Bitcoin analysis before we take a trade. All that being said, taking a look here, liquidation delta, we can recognize that we are in pretty good shape here overall as far as continuation lower potential. In other words, we're maxing out at 2.5. This coin usually hangs out in the $2 to $3 billion range in either direction before it reverses. So I think we're pretty well overextended, and there's a distinct likelihood that we do turn around. Once more, that 125 has a lot of confluence. That being said, there's not a lot of liquidation here locally. We can zoom into the last 3 days and kind of see, but 7-day time frame fully got swept there. We got some late longs, of course, below the price. And there's some shorts between 128 and 132 that could get hit. So do I foresee 130 to 135 before 120 to 115? Yes, I do. I think that's the case, mainly because there's a lot of liquidation piling up above the price. And if Solana starts to rally, then we could see that. Now, speaking of rally, we're looking at a 4-hour time frame here. We're at a 6 on TD sequential. So we've been moving for 24 hours in the same direction. 36 hours is usually the bottom in most cases, 36 to 48. But all that being said, we're 2/3 of our way through our overextension, and there's a significant fair value gap above the price rather at 133. So I think there's a good chance we do recover and bounce here. It's going to require Bitcoin to kind of stabilize though. So Bitcoin can hold 84.5 on the daily, or just say 85,000 to make it easy. And Solana maintains 125. That might be a good consideration for a long, right? Once more, we want to kind of look at how Solana is doing versus Bitcoin at that time. Between now and then, it's down 6% of the day. Bitcoin's down 5 almost 6%. They're running pretty synonymous. Not like a phenomenal situation here for this coin. So anyways, local bottom, check. Yeah, we're good to go there. This could be the bottom here for us. And based on range-bound trading, which is basically how you want to trade right now, don't be a breakout trader. Most breakout traders got destroyed just recently. You want to make sure to consider, that we're in the lower end of this range. The likelihood of further upside here is greater just based on how things go down and must come up, right? Liquidation above the price. There's a lot of complementing factors letting us kind of know that. We have, however, broken below 30 on the RSI. That's generally not a great sign. It does imply that you want to wait for RSI at 30 to be reclaimed first to make sure that our money flow index is still maintaining itself, right? So generally speaking, at this point, still higher risk to consider a trade. We got a lot of momentum to the downside. I would wait another 12 hours to see kind of where we're at. So maybe later tonight, I might reevaluate and see if Solana's looking better than Bitcoin. And if both those levels hold, we close above 85K for Bitcoin and maybe to 125 for Solana. That might be a good consideration for a long. All right. Those are my thoughts. What are yours? Let me know. Comment below.